Hey everybody, this is Surina. You're watching Now It's So Vivid, and today's video is going to be part 2 in my tarot series, and today's subject is going to be about the many, many uses of tarot. Before I get to the subject at hand, I want to remind everyone that I have the floor currently open under videos starting with my previous video and on a pinned post at the top of my Facebook page where you can submit questions for a Q&A that I'm doing. Also, if you don't want me to read your first name during the video, if you'd like to remain anonymous and that's a concern of yours, you are welcome to send me a private message on Facebook or Instagram. And I'll let you know when I decide to do the Q&A. I want to accumulate some questions first. If it happens to be something that's like, that never comes to pass, or I only just have a few questions, that's fine. I'll just do a short video and only read those few questions. But this is your opportunity to ask me anything you want, so go for it. As long as it's appropriate, I will read it out in a designated Q&A video. And now, without much further ado, let's talk about tarot usage. What a whopper of a subject. First of all, I don't even quite know how to tackle it. I decided to really just sort of stick to the things that I personally do with tarot in my magical practice. But I also wanted to give a quick nod to one of the many developments of tarot in the sort of recent past is its sudden incorporation into the psychoanalytic world. The realm of therapy and psychoanalysis has really sort of adopted tarot as a tool. It just sort of strikes me as funny because tarot was once a card game, and it was co-opted by a spiritual movement to fit their philosophies and riffed on by others, and now it's been further co-opted by a more scientific community, if you will, and being used in a very pragmatic way there. I listened to a fascinating podcast recently. I think it was Tarot Visions was the name of the podcast, and they interviewed prominent tarot writer Mary Kay Greer, and she had attended a conference of tarot in China, and because of that country's attitudes towards spiritualism, they have widely accepted tarot as pretty much a therapy tool and in their sort of like medical community, which is fascinating, mind-blowing to me, that it has come this far and that it has had such a reach. It really just sort of speaks to the infinite possibility, the potential of tarot to really reach a wider audience outside of like witchcraft or paganism or even spirituality without witchcraft. It really just, it blows my mind. So I thought that was worth mentioning. So the way that I incorporate tarot into my magical practice begins with probably the most obvious option, which is to draw cards for divination, asking questions, communing with the divine, trying to predict the future, although I tend to steer away from that facet of tarot. I'm not trying to be like a psychic or whatever. I am welcome to receiving messages from, the cosmic consciousness, but frankly, I'm not going to freak myself out with premonitions or omens or things. I know a lot of people have a hard time approaching tarot because it doesn't really pull the punches when it comes to the dark shit. And, over time I've sort of learned that when you get one of those sort of lesser favorable or less fortunate cards in one of your readings, it's not necessarily an omen of imminent doom. So maybe that's a topic for another day, but yes, I do divine with my tarot decks because that is essentially what most of them are made for anyway. I pull a card of the day for myself and I incorporate that into my journaling. I record all of my cards of the day in my day planner so I can keep track of them. And I'll also record ways that that card has sort of showed up in my life, so different synchronicities that are associated with the card of the day. An example of this would be one day I got the Ace of Coins or Pentacles, depending on what deck you're using. That suit has many names, but I got the Ace of Coins, and Ace of Coins is indicative of aces are indicative of like a newness or a start of something, and then the coins have to do with the earthly sphere, so your physical body, your health, your nutrition, your wealth, your property, stuff like that. And that very day I found a new restaurant that I really like to eat at, and I had lunch there for the first time. So that's an example of something that I would write in my planner after having drawn my card of the day and trying to see how, you know, it relates to my everyday life. I also keep it visible on my altar throughout the day, and I also try to keep cards that I'm working on for a period of time, whether it be weeks or months or whatever, visible in a certain place in this room. I tend not to carry them with me throughout the day, but I spend most of my time in this room amongst my witchy bits and my books and my art supplies, so it would make sense that if I'm trying to keep something in mind or not forget about it and really continue to learn a long-term lesson with it, that I have it in front of me. And that's a very natural inclination, I think. We keep, you know, posters on our walls for a similar reason, or we keep sticky notes up on our computer for a similar reason. So, you know, it has a very practical function in sort of helping me remember it and helping me try to learn the lesson that I need to learn from it. I'm also a fan of using tarot as a meditation tool. I do have a couple of decks in my collection that are really, really good for that, especially for me, if they have more of a surreal or abstract art style, where things aren't quite so on the nose and you have to like really sort of sit with the symbolism and the color and the composition and all of those things to really kind of draw more abstract meaning from them. It's really relying more on your inner thoughts than it is on having everything spelled out for you, and that's a way that I find is really helpful in terms of tarot and meditation. So that's what I like to do, and again, I will keep it on display, especially if I'm working with it in like a 10 to 15 minute session. I want to have it in front of me. I also incorporate tarot into my spell work. I've done whole spells based on just a card. I've done whole, meditation and pathworking exercises on certain cards. I've incorporated them into crystal grids. I have incorporated them into I've incorporated them into like charms and things, but usually it's done with like a photocopy or a printed copy of a card where I might color it in. I did that once, but for the most part I just try to like fold it up and stick it in a baggie with some other things to emulate a particular feel for the charm, whatever I need it for. And I also like to do a particular spread once a month on the new moon on my prosperity altar, where I have this, it's a riff on a spell that I found online. I'll try to look it up and link it down below so you guys can see where I derived this idea from, but I put my own twist on it, and what I've done is I use the tarot as a crossroads spell in terms of my prosperity. So I will draw two cards and I will lay them one on top of the other in a cross section like that, and those are the two roads that have to intersect for the next lunar cycle that will lead me to, my success, that will give me the best advice in achieving that success for the month. So that's something that I've definitely really kept up with, especially over the past year. It's really been very, money. It's helping me out a lot. So I recommend that to anyone. The types of readings that I do also vary. Sometimes I will just draw one card. Sometimes I'll draw two cards and let them have a conversation together, see how they play off of each other. I find that small is really better, especially when you're just asking like quick questions. Larger spreads are great, but usually I do larger spreads if I'm just trying to do a general reading for myself, and I'm not trying to be quite so specific. I just don't think that it's always so necessary to lay out this enormous elaborate 12 card spread or whatever. It has its function, but it's not it's not one of my everyday go-to things. I also like 3 card spreads for things like past, present, future, or you, me, us. That's a thing that I like to do. I actually have like a deck interview spread that I do where I let the cards tell me what the deck is like. I let the cards tell me what they think I'm like, and I let the cards tell me how we're going to work together. So it's a you, me, us situation with a 3 card spread, and that's a common deck interview that I do. Also, because someone mentioned it in my prior video, that they had a hard time understanding the concept of the parlor game Tarocchi or Triumphi Appropriati. To recap, it's when you draw a card and then you have to make a story. Well, I've done this as actually a writing exercise before. Oh crap, I forgot to bring a deck of cards. That's the whole point! Okay, problem solved. So I have here with me my mini version of the Rider-Waite-Smith, and wish me luck, because I'm going to try to demonstrate how I do this on camera. Let's see how it goes. Okay. So, we are going to create a little story using the Five of Swords, and then the Nine of Wands, and then death. Okay, so, once upon a time, there was a dishonorable man. He was a petty thief, and would keep no alliances, and had no friends. As a result of this, he always thought the worst about others, expecting no more from them that he would give them himself. This is weird. And then one day, as a result of his pettiness, he died and left nothing behind. So, I mean, like, that's a really shallow interpretation of the cards, and truly, it doesn't have to get any more complex than that. Like, you don't necessarily have to become, like, the world's greatest story writer, but it is a fun exercise, and I think it really, it sort of builds up, like, a kind of muscle in your brain to open the interpretations of each card to multiple avenues, so that you don't have to feel so fixed or, you know, claustrophobic. I know that a lot of criticisms that people who prefer pip decks have is they think that these sort of vignette images that are on tarot cards are, you know, a restriction, like they don't let you see outside of that particular interpretation. And I don't know that I believe that that's 100% true. It might be a little true. And it certainly does give a lot of people trouble, but I feel like a lot of that has to do with how willing you are to see outside of just the picture that's presented, or the way that it's sort of transcribed in, you know, Waite's book, Arthur Edward Waite's book on the tarot, because he gave his own particular interpretation of the cards, but that's not really the point. The point isn't to get bogged down in what the deck creator thinks about their own cards. It's about how you interpret them when you're using them in a reading. I think that's way more important. And the more cards you pull, the more nuanced you can get. Like, I've gotten stuck. I remember I was writing a book a little while ago, and I got stuck on a plot point, and I couldn't figure out what the hell to do next. And I pulled a tarot card, and I think it was one of the swords or something, and that just gave me an idea of where to go. It's just sort of eye-opening, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have to be restrictive. It's sort of to give you a nudge in the next direction. And I believe that doing this exercise can really help stimulate your imagination, and I think that's one of the many beautiful things about tarot, is that it really does stir the imagination. So I think that's pretty good as a start, a tarot summary of usage, especially in my magical practice, because I'm sure there are many ways to incorporate tarot into your life. Certain ways that I'm not even familiar with. If you have any that you think that I should be aware of, please share away. I will see you next time. In that video, we're going to talk about where I do my readings, where I store my cards. We're going to get more, you know, hands-on and actually, like, get into the nitty-gritty of handling your tarot cards and all the different ways that you can get acquainted with them physically. So until then, sweet dreams, everybody.